Your news program every morning with up-to-the-minute news and extensive analysis of issues from Korea and abroad. This morning with Alex Jensen on TBS EFM.
The time is 8:17, nearly 8:18, and on Monday this week, the UK Cabinet Office released a report titled The Process for Withdrawing from the European Union. But in that, it stated a decision to walk out could mean up to 10 years of turmoil. The likes of London Mayor Boris Johnson have labelled the government's approach to the Brexit issue Project Fear, saying it's blatant scaremongering. I suppose Mr. Jack Montgomery, spokesperson for the Leave.EU campaign, might agree. Let's welcome him on the line. Good morning from Seoul.
Hi there.
I suppose having London Mayor Boris Johnson's a pretty important ambassador for the campaign overall, but it does feel to a certain extent that the common sense analysis has been pointing towards maintaining the status quo. What are your major arguments for leaving?
Well, I think there is no status quo within the European Union, and it changes all the time, normally for the worse. You never know when it's going to impose a new regulation, so let's say the Clinical Trials Directive, sort of dropped in our laps. Very damaging for the NHS, raised costs, halved the number of non-commercial clinical trials in the country, doubled the cost of cancer trials. Then more recently, you had amendments to VAT law in the digital single market, which ran thousands of sort of online startups out of business because they couldn't cope with the new system. There isn't a status quo in the European Union. There isn't any certainty in the European Union. And, you only have to go and look at the industries like fishing or like steel, which are being harmed by the European Union, to see that.
When we look at the British people, though, who would be voting on this in June, to stay or to leave, how many of them do you feel are undecided at this stage?
I think a good number. The polls tend to always seem to show somewhere in the region of sort of a fifth to a quarter of the electorate still make up their mind. I think it could actually be significantly higher than that. There's people out there waiting to see what the arguments are. They want to see what the government has to say. They want to see if the government has a case, a strong case, or if it is just building a case, as you've mentioned already, built on sort of fear, playing people's fears, playing to people's apprehension about changing things. The government doesn't seem to be making a very good case, certainly not from our perspective. People don't seem to be buying into the case. We are slowly but surely turning the polls in our direction.
Can you give us a sense of where you're at then at the moment regarding popularity? If there was a vote today, what would the likely outcome be?
It's impossible to say, and the polls, most of the polls at the moment show a slight lead for Leave. There was a significant lead for Stay in the beginning, but as time has wore on, as Cameron's go back to the people weren't particularly impressed by it. The polls have shifted in the direction of Leave, giving a slight lead to Leave, but with a significant chunk of people who are still in the don't know camp and who could sway either way.
What's the major problem with...
So there's everything to play for.
OK, but what's the major problem with David Cameron's compromise? Because the EU obviously wants Britain to stay, and there are several politicians who and members of the public who also want to stay. But David Cameron has tried to appease those in the undecided camp by coming up with a compromise. What's the problem with that?
Because there's nothing in the compromise. None of the big issues with the European Union, for example, the fact that there is an unelected commission in Brussels which sets EU law above national laws, which we can't countermand. We cannot, there's nothing to empower us to control EU migration. We have no power to make trade deals on our own initiative or to cast an independent vote on important global bodies like the World Trade Organization. There was nothing really in this compromise. It got a terrible reception. I think something like 60% of the public polled said it was a bad deal, with a much smaller percentage saying they thought it was a good deal and decided. So that's the problem with this compromise. It's just this completely empty, non-binding, nothing in it, and it's not going to do anything to change any of the problems that we have at present.
The argument, though, is that the deal could be far worse if Britain is to leave, to maintain trade links with the EU, that would cost far more. Well, do you not worry about that?
No, not at all. Outside the European Union, I think we would have much more leverage when it comes to the likes of trade than we do at present. At present, there's countries we would like to be making trade deals with, Australia, New Zealand, our old partners in India. This hasn't been done. It would have been done decades ago, but it hasn't been done because it's been obstructed by other EU member states who outvote us in the European Council more often than any other country. Whereas outside, we would be the Eurozone's single biggest export market. They would be banging down our door to try to sign a trade deal because they have a whole lot of problems to deal with. The last thing they need is to be restricting their access to one of their biggest consumer markets.
But Britain does have a significant portion of exports going to other European nations, just over half, according to the goods statistics that I've seen. Is it not worrying
that... It's about 43%. It hasn't been over half for some years. About 43%.
But solely on goods, though?
Probably lower.
Solely on goods, not including services?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's correct either. It might be, but then I would say I don't think that trade is not going to disappear. It's a bit of a non-argument. The Remain campaign like to say how much trade we have with the European Union, how many people have jobs linked to trade with the European Union. But none of that would stop after leaving. The European Union trades with tons of countries which are not European Union member states. With South Korea has a brilliant trading relationship with the European Union. Free trade in goods, free trade in services, but no free movement in people and no unelected European Commission dictating South Korea's regulations to it.
Speaking of South Korea, we were warned by an analyst last week who was very cautious about the Brexit when he said that the whole world would be affected, including us here, that it would cause shockwaves. It's not your primary concern, I understand, but do you have any words of comfort to offer us?
I don't think that South Korea has anything to fear from the United Kingdom coming out of the European Union and taking its place on the world stage as a freestanding, independent nation, just the same as South Korea. We plan on being a sort of an open trading nation, a good relationship with our neighbours in Europe, and having a much more extensive, deeper relationship with other countries around the world, which we'd like to be more engaged with, but cannot be at present because the European Commission controls trade policy for us and blocks us from deepening our relations around the world. It's nothing for anyone to be frightened of. It's all this talk of a leap in the dark, shockwaves, years of uncertainty. It's the normal condition for every advanced economy around the world, which is not in the European Union, to govern its own affairs, to make its own laws, and to represent itself globally. It's perfectly normal, and there's no reason we should be afraid of it, and there's no reason anyone else should be afraid of us doing it.
But if the Grexit, the possible Greek exit, would have caused turmoil, surely the impact of a British exit would be far greater. That's how the argument goes.
Well, a Grexit would have been a sort of forced exit, a traumatic kind of split from the European Union, caused by the European Union's the total failure of the euro as a European Union project and the intransigent attitude of the European Commission and the Troika, which has been effectively dictating economic policy for Greece. Britain's exit from the European Union would be an amicable divorce. We would take stock after a vote to leave, and when we set out we'd come to an idea of what our stall would be, we would activate Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, which is the legal kind of normal way of coming out of the European Union, and then there would be a 2-year period where we would get all our affairs in order, and then we would move out. And there's no reason that it should be particularly traumatic or difficult for anyone concerned. would be much better off as good neighbours and equal partners of the European Union rather than sort of awkward tenants.
Mr. Montgomery, we've got to leave it there. It's a fascinating debate to watch from afar. We hope whichever way it goes, it'll be for the best for Britain, but also for the world, selfishly speaking. Obviously, we don't want to see those shockwaves that some have been allowing us to fear.
Nothing to be worried about. There's nothing to be worried about.
OK, well, we hope to have confidence if indeed your side does win. Jack Montgomery from the Leave.EU campaign. In fact, that is a website, Leave.EU, where a number of those arguments are spelled out. And you can check that out if you fancy. Better informing yourself ahead of the big referendum in June. And you can email your opinions and questions to us, efmthismorning@gmail.com. We're going to have a live daily voice for you very shortly, heading abroad for that. Find out more. And we'll also be going on location to Japan in the next half hour.